Hello and welcome back. I am messing around with a lesson. I'll be going over the basics of synthesis today, specifically in Reaper. I had a couple of different things open from earlier. We're gonna simplify this a little bit and go to a different synth that's a little bit simpler. The main reason I was using this Surge synth is because it has a lot of different options. Okay, let's see. Where is it? This one? Yeah, okay. So, I'm gonna go over some basics of synthesis here. Let's see, can I bring up the initialize patch? Okay, that looks good, looks good, looks good. Gonna turn off these modifiers. Okay. I think that will be good for now. Okay. So, basics of synthesis. So I'm going to be going over what makes up a synthesizer and the basic elements of what makes up a synthesizer, and we're going to sort of visualize the different sort of effects that different synth building steps have on the sound. So to start off, I'm using this VST synth. I actually don't know. Sinister. I guess that sort of makes sense. So this VST is called Sinister, and it is a free VST. You can look it up. I'll have a link in the description. But trying to decide how I want to explain this. I want to upload a video to YouTube, so I'm sort of presenting it in a way that makes sense for YouTube. I might come at this again. So, we're going to go over the basics of synthesis, what makes up a synthesizer. I'm going to be using Reaper today, and we're going to talk about the different elements that make up most synthesizers. There's lots of different types of synthesis, ways to make sounds, but most synthesizers use the same basic elements. And once you understand the basic elements, you can approach most synthesizers and sort of have an idea of what you're doing. So to start off, I'm going to be using this VST called Sinister. It's a free VST, so if this appeals to you, you can go ahead and just find. I'll have a link in the description to this, so that you can download it and mess with it yourself. The main reason that I like it for this scenario is it's laid out in a way that breaks up the different elements fairly clearly. So yeah, anyways, starting off, one of the base elements of a synthesizer is oscillators. And so in Sinister, there are 3 oscillators. So these 3 boxes right here, each of them is an oscillator. And right now, I just have oscillator 1 enabled, but oscillator 2 and 3 are disabled. Basically, what an oscillator is going to do is it's going to create some tone, some sort of oscillating wave shape that you then can manipulate with different components down the line. But very simply, a oscillator is either the basic waveforms are generally square wave, which looks like this, a sawtooth wave, which looks like this, or a triangle wave that looks like this. Sine waves are also very common and used a lot in synthesis, but this specific synthesizer does not have a sine wave oscillator or option for just using a sine wave in your oscillator. We also actually have one more option here that is relatively common, and that is a noise oscillator. And this is white noise. Sometimes you'll have more control over the type of noise, but essentially what the noise oscillator is just, oops. Well, I will need to restart this because that's annoying. I still have a surge in here. I thought I replaced the surge, but I guess I didn't. Okay. Well, we'll try this again in just a second. I'll stretch this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. And what does making this bigger do? Nothing. Okay. Okay, let's try this again. So, basics of synthesis. Put this here, and this. How do I want to lay this out? Okay, so basics of synthesis. Today I'm going to talk about what makes up synthesizers and the basic elements, and sort of give you the tools to be able to approach any synth and be able to have an idea of what things are and how things work, so you can do your own sound design and synth creation. Today I'm going to be using a VST called Sinister. It's a free VST. There will be a link in the description if you're interested in it. I'm going to be using Reaper. That's the DAW that I'm using, Digital Audio Workstation. And I'm also have 2 other VSTs open, and these 2 come with Reaper. This is an oscilloscope to show us our waveform, and then I have a equalizer that will give us feedback on what frequencies are coming through. So these two are just sort of to visualize some of the things that we're doing with the sound. So talking about a synth, the base sort of element of a synth is oscillators. In Sinister, there are 3 oscillators, and right now I just have the first oscillator turned on, so you can turn the oscillators on and off right here. So right now these 2 are disabled, so we just have this one oscillator. And different oscillators have different ways that they create waveforms, but the most sort of basic waveforms are going to be sawtooth wave, which is the one that we have right here. So let me play that. I was feeling so good. Why are these not working? Because it is after everything. It's annoying. Okay. Okay. Try this again. Okay, so basics of synthesis. Today we're going to be talking about what makes up a synthesizer and the elements that you use to create synth sounds from a very basic standpoint. We're going to talk about the elements that make up synthesizers and how you can use them to create any sort of sounds that you want. So I'm going to be using this VST called Sinister. It's a free VST. You can find a link to that in the description. And I'm also going to be using 2 other VSTs that actually come with this DAW I'm using, Reaper, the program that I'm using to make music in this video. We have a oscilloscope. This will visualize the waveform that is being played, and then I have an EQ that will give us feedback on what frequencies are coming out of the sound. So to get started, we're going to talk about the most basic element of a synthesizer, the oscillator. And I said oscillators single, but a synthesizer can have multiple oscillators. This device, the Sinister, has 3 oscillators, but right now I only have 1 oscillator enabled. So these ones can be enabled, but they are currently off. So oscillator is the part of the synth that makes a waveform that is then manipulated with the other elements of the synthesizer to make complex sounds. But from a very simple standpoint, it creates these wave shapes. So right now this is a sawtooth wave, and essentially what this is doing is just at a based on what note I hit on the keyboard, it will oscillate this shape over time, and that is what you hear as sound. So you can actually imagine like the cone of a speaker goes in and out and pushes air. So you can imagine that this is the shape. So from left to right is time, and up and down is the cone of the speaker going in and out. So the cone is going out and then comes back immediately, and then goes out and then comes back immediately, and that's the shape. This is happening very, very quickly, and that is what makes this tone. So if I was to switch to a different waveform, so this is, like I said, this is a sawtooth waveform. It's this shape. If I switch to a different waveform, like a square, which looks like this, the cone would instead be going out immediately, staying and then coming in. I say immediately, but it's close to immediately, and that's what makes this sound. This square wave is made from the cone going out, coming in, going out, coming in, as opposed to the sawtooth wave where it's gradually coming out, then comes back quickly, and then gradually goes out, and then comes back quickly. And again, I'm saying gradually, but this is happening at a very fast rate, faster than you can like visually see the cone of your speakers doing. You can actually visually see it if you start playing really bassy low notes, but it has to be so extremely low that you won't even like really be able to hear the tone. But just interesting. So different waveforms have different harmonic qualities. So if we look at me holding this sawtooth note down, you can see, I guess sort of describe what's happening here. So the note that we're playing is a specific frequency. So you can see the frequency that it is. Like these points are the harmonics of this note. So the main note that you're hearing or seeing is the one that I'm playing. So if I go down on the keyboard, you can see this moving down frequency-wise. And each of these harmonics going up are for lack of a, I'm just sort of repeating myself, but these are harmonics, and harmonics are the like octaves, or depending on the sort of waveform shape, they can be more than just octaves. But visually right here, what you're seeing is each octave going up is, you can hear some amount of higher octaves in notes that you play, and that's like the higher frequencies that you hear are the higher octaves of a note coming through. I probably could have explained that in a better way, but anyways, so if I play lower notes, obviously the lower frequencies will show up, and as you move up, it moves up along this visualized equalizer. So yeah, I guess this is a learning experience for myself. I'm trying to figure out how the best way to explain. So let me see if I can get something at roughly 500 hertz. So this note is roughly at 500 hertz. It's not quite, but if you can see this 500 mark, yeah, doubling 500 is 1,000, and so the next harmonic is at 1,000, and that is because octaves are just the frequency that you're hearing either doubled or halved, depending on if you are going up an octave or down an octave. So if you're going up an octave, then you double the frequency. And if you half the octave, or if you go down an octave, you half the frequency. So this note is near 500 hertz, and you can see the harmonics jumping up by a degree of 2. So doubled is 1000, doubled again is 2000, doubled again is 4000, and then doubled again is 8000, which is hard to pick out exactly where that is. Yeah, man. I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. I should probably stick to just talking about oscillators and not get too into frequencies and harmonics, because that's something that is a rabbit hole, or it could be a separate video. But yeah, basically, if I'm playing this note, you can see it being like, okay, so this note is C sharp is very close to 300 hertz, and so if I went an octave up, the main resonating frequency should be like 600 hertz. So let's see if that is true. Yep, 600 hertz. 500, and then this next mark is 600, and that's our next resonating frequency. If I was to go up another octave, then our main resonating frequency would be 1.2K, so somewhere around this range. And let's go and do that. Yep, right here. This is 1.2K hertz. And then going up another octave would be 2.4. And that is what happens. But all that is not super necessary for learning how a synth works. That's more talking about harmonics, which is valuable for knowing the differences between waveforms, or why you'd want to use one waveform over another. But getting back to what makes up an oscillator and a synth. So there are 4 main waveforms that, there's 3 main waveforms that most synthesizers have, and then there are a couple others that are quite common, but not all synths have. So the most basic waveforms that show up most often are sawtooth waves, which is this one. We have square wave, which is this one. And then we have a triangle wave, which is this one. Those are the most common waveforms that you'll come across in a synthesizer, but there is a lot more diversity beyond that. Other common waveforms are noise waveforms, which are they're atonal. And then there are sine wave oscillators, which this actual synthesizer, the Sinister, does not have a sine wave oscillator, but it would look like this shape, this sort of sideways S shape. And like I said, we don't have that option here, but that is all right. Those are the basics for waveforms for an oscillator, but oscillators aren't that useful without 2 qualities. When I say that useful, most synthesizers do some initial work before you mess with it at all, and one of those things is they make it so that when you play notes, it affects the sound. One of the ways that it affects the sound is it will change the frequency based on what note you're hitting. So like if I go half a step up on the keyboard, it will change the the frequency of that note by half a step. Also, it will usually have an envelope that affects the volume or the amplitude, and that is what makes it so the sound starts when you hit the note and it will end when you stop hitting the note, or sometimes it will end sooner, and that is getting into what envelope does. So to describe what the basics of what an envelope does in regards to an oscillator is it determines how quickly the sound of the oscillator starts playing. That is the attack. So if the attack is very low, the sound will begin immediately after you press the note. It will reach full volume immediately after you press the note. Whereas if you bring up the attack, the volume will gradually reach full volume over a period of time. So if this attack is 5 seconds, then it will take 5 seconds for the volume or the amplitude to reach full. So let me play a note. So after 5 seconds, it reached full volume, and you'll notice that it got to full volume, and then right after it got to full volume, it came down in volume, and that is getting to what our next two parameters are for this envelope, and that is decay and sustain. So decay is also an amount of time, and sustain is a level. So sustain is the level that the volume will be, or the amplitude will be, after the decay time. So if the decay is immediate or all the way down, then as soon as the volume reaches full, it will turn down immediately to the level that is the sustain. So if sustain is all the way up, then it will not turn down the volume at all. So if I hit a note, it will reach full volume and then stay there, because it's not being reduced by the sustain amount at all. Whereas if the sustain was all the way down, that would mean that the volume is turned all the way down almost immediately because of the decay after it reaches full volume, which is the attack. So it's going to increase in volume, and then as soon as it reaches full volume, it's going to immediately turn off. If I bring up the decay, that means it will take longer before it will turn to the level of the sustain. So right now the sustain is turning the volume all the way off, or the amplitude all the way off. So if I have the decay to, for example, 5 seconds, we have an attack at 5 seconds, so decay at 5 seconds. That means it's going to take 5 seconds to reach full volume, and then it's going to take another 5 seconds to reach the level of the sustain, which is currently going to be essentially off. So if I hit a note, it will take 5 seconds to get to full volume. After it gets to full volume, it will take 5 seconds to get to silence. If I'll bring the attack back down again, and if I have the attack all the way down, then it will immediately be at full volume, and then if the decay is at 5 seconds, it will take 5 seconds for the volume or amplitude to get to whatever the sustain is at. So again, sustain is all the way down, so it's going to turn the volume all the way down after 5 seconds. So full volume, and then after 5 seconds, it will be turned all the way down. And then if I had the decay shorter, like a fraction of a second, so this is 0.525 seconds, then it will be at full volume when I hit the note, and then after 0.525 seconds, it will be turned all the way down. If I don't want it turned all the way down, then I can bring the sustain up, and it will be turned down a bit after that short time. So the sustain is the amount, the volume that you want the note to be at after the attack and decay happen. The final parameter is release, and this is the amount of time that it takes to go from wherever the sustain was at, or wherever the volume or amplitude is at currently. This is the amount of time that it takes until it turns all the way off after you release the note. So if the release is all the way down, then as soon as I release my finger from the note, the volume will go to 0. Whereas if I have the release up, for example, to 5 seconds, then it will take 5 seconds for the level to go from wherever it's at to nothing once I release my finger. So if I just hit it quickly, it'll take 5 seconds for it to turn all the way off. But if I like hold a note down, right now I'm holding a note down and it's at the sustain level right now. And then when I release my finger, it will take 5 seconds for it to go from this current level down to nothing. The envelope shape can be visualized here. So let me adjust these settings to make it a little bit easier to, oops, not these settings. Reset those. If I bring the attack up a bit, I bring the decay up a bit, and I bring the sustain down. This is a good visualizer of how an envelope works. So the attack is the amount of time that it takes to reach full volume, and then the decay, so adjusting the attack moves that around. Then the decay is the amount of time it goes from full volume down to this point here, so it extends or shrinks that. And then the sustain is how high, what level this is, so sustain will have that go up and down. And then release is how much time after you release the note, so this point right here is you releasing the note, and then release is the amount of time it takes to go down to 0, down to silence. So release will do nothing if the sustain is all the way down, and the decay will do nothing if the sustain is all the way up. So that's something to keep in mind. That's the basics of how an envelope works in regards to volume or amplitude. And so that's how an oscillator and an envelope can be used to make different sounds. So if you want like a plucky sound, like plucking a guitar or plucking a string, you would have a short attack, you'd have a relatively short decay, and then your sustain level would be down a bit from, it would be lower. So you could have it up a little bit. So you could have the sustain up a little bit if you want some sustained note after the pluck. So if I had this up a little bit. That's with the sustain up a bit. If I wanted it to be just the pluck and no sustain after the pluck, I'd bring the sustain all the way down. And then I have the release up right now, so if I release the note before the decay finishes, then it will take the 3.32 seconds to get back down to silence. So if I wanted this plucky sound, I might not want any release, so I would probably have it something like this. Yeah, that's very basics of an envelope and an oscillator. If I wanted like a more sort of slow string sound, a sort of swell, I would bring up the attack, and so it would sort of come into the full sound. I'd probably want the sustain up pretty high, so that once it reaches full volume, it will stay there as long as I'm holding the notes. So I might even have the sustain all the way up for this. I might also want to bring up the release a little bit. You can use the release somewhat like reverb, whereas when I let go of the notes, there will still be some sound ringing out. Anyways, that is just some ways that you can use the envelope with the oscillator. Moving along, I talked about envelopes a little bit, but we're going to move on to filters and talk about how you can use filters to shape your sound further. So essentially what a filter is doing is it is depending on the type of filter that you're using, it will take out certain frequencies from the sound that you're making with your oscillator. So let me simplify my envelope. I'll have quick attack, I'll have the sustain all the way up, and then the release I'll have pretty short. So sounds like that. So I'm going to turn on this filter 1, and we're going to use a low pass filter, which is the most common filter to use when doing synthesis and sound design. And essentially what a low pass filter does is it takes it cuts out frequencies starting with the high frequencies and lets the low frequencies pass through unaffected. So to visually see how this works, I'm going to hold a note down. So these are the high frequencies up here. These are the low frequencies down here. This is the low pass cutoff. So this is what frequencies start to get cut off. So right now it's at 20,000 hertz, which is way up here. As I bring this down, you'll see it start to cut off frequencies. And the effect that has on the sound is it starts to sound like it's getting put underwater or getting covered up. And that is something that comes from basically waveforms have different lengths based on their frequency, how fast they are. So higher frequencies are much tighter. So like if I played something, you can see that the amount of time that oscillates in a second is a lot higher than the amount of times that a lower note oscillates in a second. So like physically they are bigger and smaller. So low frequencies, because they're bigger, they have an easier time traveling through objects. It's harder to stop low frequencies with thinner objects. So like a piece of paper can block high frequencies much easier than a low frequency, because a piece of paper, the thickness of a piece of paper is, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. Essentially, the thicker the whatever you're using, and this also has to do with its rigidity and like how much it vibrates itself. But essentially, thicker objects, frequencies have to travel further through them to come out the other side. And so if a frequency oscillates a lot of time in a short distance, it will be more affected. High frequencies will be more affected and dampened than low frequencies. Because if a low frequency is like imagine it being like a foot long oscillation, it could make it through more material with having it will have less effect on a low frequency because it's larger and it can go through. I'm not explaining this the best way, but that's the basic concept. Is low frequencies have an easier time going through things than high frequencies. And so when you are outside of a building that is playing music, or outside of a car, if a car is going by and the windows are up, you can hear the low frequencies a lot clearer than you can hear the high frequencies. And that's because low frequencies can travel through objects easier. I tried to get into a more detailed explanation, but I ended up just, I think, making it more confusing. So anyways, low pass filter, you can make something sound more muffled, and it lets the low frequencies pass through. Whereas a high pass filter is sort of the opposite. It lets the high frequencies through, and it will gradually cut out low frequencies based on, as I turn this up, it will turn down the low frequencies. Band pass is a specific area. So a specific band. So a band is some amount of space in between the left and the right, rather than being everything higher than a certain point or everything lower than a certain point. A band is a specific space in between the left and the right. So it's basically I'm cutting out low frequencies and high frequencies and just letting ones through in the middle. This specific filter, this bandpass filter, is a little bit different than you often come across. Usually a bandpass filter will have just a single frequency knob, and it will be a sort of set width, and move through the bands in that specific width, or move through the frequencies in that specific width. But this one actually is essentially having a low pass filter and a high pass filter together. And so you can sort of hone it into the specific area that you want. Yeah. Low pass ladder filter. So this is something I actually need to look up because I don't know the exact ladder filter. Ladder versus yeah, because low pass filters, I'm used to them being like low pass ladder filter. So let me see if I can get a clear explanation here. My understanding is a ladder filter is just like a specific kind of like a specific kind of like low pass filter. The way that it is showing up here is it's essentially the same as a low pass filter. And I want to try and find the real difference. So to me, what it's looking like is a low pass. The low pass is just like a more gradual cutoff than the ladder, which is a more abrupt cutoff. I'm used to filters having like 12 or 24 to describe the sharpness of the cutoff. So 12 is a less sharp cutoff and might look something like this, whereas 24 is a more abrupt cutoff that looks more like this. I'm not really sure why they use the word ladder here. Unfortunately, I don't know enough about it to give a good answer. But anyways, that's the very basics of how filters work, or yeah, what filters are doing. I didn't describe resonation. So this is for having a frequency that is essentially boosted, so resonated. And if you bring up the resonance, then it will resonate whatever frequency is being sort of cut off, the point that it's cutting from with the filter frequency. So if I turn this up, you'll see the frequency at the point that I'm cutting being boosted. So it can give like a tonal quality to a filtered sound. So, and this is something that you can also resonate with a high pass filter or band pass filter. Interesting, you can't resonate with this band pass. This band pass is weird, but anyways, you can resonate with low pass or high pass. So I want this to be the same frequency as that one. So 530. There we go. So if I switch between these, it's resonating the same frequency. Honestly, I'm used to filters not having a separate knob for high pass and low pass, and it just being a frequency knob and a resonance knob, and then you choose the filter type over here. Yeah, sort of strange to me. But anyways, you can use filters in a more complex way by using modifiers to change the frequency of resonance or resonance. So in this synthesizer, the Sinister, the way you use modifiers on different parameters is with these sort of modifier boxes down here. So one of the most common modifiers that you use on a filter is an envelope. So we're going to have envelope 2 affecting this knob. So if we bring this knob up, it will be turning up this knob, and we bring it down, it'll be turning down that knob. So it's pretty common to do something like having your low pass down having the envelope turn up this frequency knob, and then having the envelope shape be your plucky sound, or your slow attack sound. It gives it a different sort of flavor than doing the plucky sound or the slow attack sound with the volume envelope or amplitude envelope. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So same basic thing. We have attack, decay, sustain, release. So if I had like a slow attack on this, then it will start at the point that this frequency knob is at currently, and then gradually come up. And so it will gradually open up the filter over the course of the 5 seconds. If I brought this all the way down, it would immediately be turned up to this level, and then it will decay over a short time to the sustain level, which is currently all the way up, so it won't be turned down at all. And then after I release, it will take 0.5 seconds before you won't really get to hear that because the release on the volume is low. But if I had this release up, it starts to filter it after I release the note as well. So I wanted a plucky sound, I would bring the sustain level down. I might bring it up a little bit. I would bring the decay up a little bit. And so over a very short period of time, it will be full volume, or the filter will be opened up, and then it will quickly be turned down to the sustain level. So you can hear at the front of me hitting the note some extra brightness. And if I bring this up more, it should be more pronounced. Bring this down a little bit. So this is with the filter on. If I turn the filter off, this makes the sound a little bit rounder, and obviously because of the envelope makes it sort of plucky. If I turn the envelope off and just had the filter on, I'll just reset this value. It just makes the sound round. Because it's cutting off all the high frequencies. But as I bring the amount that the envelope affects the filter up, then it will get some more brightness because the filter's not cutting off as much because of the envelope shape. Oh. Okay. That is super simple what filter does and how you can use an envelope with a filter for sound design. Another one of the most common modifiers for synthesizers are LFOs, which stand for low frequency oscillator. And essentially these are oscillators like up here, but instead of using it to make a sound, you use them to turn knobs or adjust values of other things. These will also often be oscillating at a rate that is slower, too slow to like audibly hear a note. So it would be super low notes if you plug this into a speaker, for example. so that you wouldn't hear it. But you can often bring LFOs up to a speed that is actually audible. But like I said, they're generally used to control things rather than to make sounds themselves. So by default, this LFO is a sine wave shape. So basically in that shape, it will be adjusting a value up and down and up and down. So if I want this LFO to affect something like this this low pass filter knob, I will go choose LFO 1, and then I'll bring this up, and now this knob will be turned up and down in this shape whenever I hit a note. So the current speed that it is doing this is set by this frequency knob. So it's sort of slow right now. If I want it to go faster, I can bring up the frequency amount. Let me bring down this release. So this is getting to be a sort of pretty fast LFO. Essentially, though, what it's doing, all it's doing is, if I reset this, oops, it's just bringing this up and down at that speed. I can't manually do it very well, but essentially instead of having to manually do it, I can have it controlled by this LFO. So there are other parameters that will show up on LFOs, and they can have different names. In this case, this one has fade in, and this is essentially giving an attack value to the LFO. So instead of it being affecting this filter knob immediately, I can have it take some time. It will like gradually be affecting this knob. So if I had this all the way up, after 10 seconds, that's probably a little bit too long. I'll do like 5 seconds. So after like 5 seconds, it will go from not affecting it at all to affecting it. So it gradually affects it. Yeah, that is very basic. So LFO shape. So I could do like a square wave. So instead of having a smooth up and down, it is all the way up and then all the way down and then all the way up and then all the way down. So that can sound more like turning it on and off, turning on and off. I'll bring this fade in down again. If I brought this down, it would be less prominent. But essentially, what this shape is doing is just turning this up and then back down, and then up and down, rather than it being a smooth motion with the sine wave shape. And then there's the step up, which we can hear how that sounds. This actually sounds like a random. So I guess there's like random values. So if you wanted some random step values, you can use that option. Sine wave and square are definitely the most used. I think sine wave is used far more than any other waveform type, but you'll find LFOs that have triangle waves or sawtooth waves or like a wide variety of different sort of waveform shapes. So we were using this LFO to affect this filter frequency knob, but we can use it for other things as well. So let me, for example, I could have this LFO affect the frequency, essentially the pitch of this oscillator. So if I went to LFO 1, if I had this all the way down, it wouldn't be affecting it at all. But if I brought this up a little bit, it'd be pitching it up and down, giving it sort of a wobble. Let me bring up this filter. And as I bring it more, it will be pitching it larger and larger amount. It can give a sort of spooky feel. If I like bring this frequency amount, or if I bring this this pitch amount really low. Give this sort of detuned feel. What else? So yeah, if I had it on square wave, it'd be essentially just going between two notes. Smooth or square. And then the frequency amount, changing the speed that it bends this can be nice. If you bring up the frequency very high, you can start to have it. Well, it starts to become FM synthesis, frequency mod. This is another type of synthesis. I don't think I'm gonna get into that right now, but essentially, when you start bringing the speed at which you are modifying the pitch of another oscillator up to like an audible range, it starts having like pretty interesting and unique ways that it affects sound. So let me bring this up a little bit. As I bring this up, it starts to sound more just like a detuned sound. Anyways, it's fun sound. Other things in this device, we have effects, which we have delay, choir, flang. This is sort of like stereo effect stuff. Lo-fi, just like a bit crush kind of thing. Clip is just like a distortion. Yeah. I started off trying to make this a video, but it was more of a sort of lesson for myself how I want to present this information. Feel free to ask any questions if you are watching this and any of that didn't make sense, or if you do understand it but you feel like I didn't explain something very well. Also, feel free to let me know. I want to improve this. I'm honestly not the biggest fan of this synthesizer, the Sinister. The reason I chose it is because the way it's laid out, I think, makes it easy to follow, as opposed to like a synth that I prefer. Let me actually open it up in here. I prefer the Charlatan as far as sound design goes. But it's like the way it's laid out can be a little bit like the oscillators over here, which makes sense. The pitch being here, I think, can be maybe a little bit confusing because it is like still oscillators. Noise is like it's not its own. This is also an oscillator, but it just says noise. I mean, I guess that's not hard to explain. The filter is here, which I think makes a good amount of sense. It doesn't have a high pass filter, which is fine. I hardly ever use a high pass filter in my synth sound design. And then the modifiers are over here, LFO and envelopes. And then this global bit is like fairly oscillator focused, but it's over here. But like I said, I like this one a lot better because all the information is tighter, and it sort of ignores some of the things that I don't use all that much. Like having more than 2 oscillators, the amount of times that I use more than 2 oscillators is pretty low. It's nice having, but like don't use it that often. Then having more than an envelope for the amp envelope and an envelope for the filter, something that I hardly ever do, but again, it's nice to have because if you get into more advanced sound design, it is something that you're going to want to do. And then LFOs, having 3 LFOs is also a fairly advanced thing. A single LFO is generally fine and all you need for basic sound design. The filters, I don't like. The way that the bandpass works is weird to me, and the ladder and low pass being opposite from each other is sort of, I don't know, there's just some things about that I'm just not as necessary. I never use 2 filters. That's a fairly advanced sound design thing. And I have, if I want to do more advanced sound design, I'm not going to be using this synth. There's much better options for advanced sound design. The effects in here are fine, but sort of like, I don't know. I most often use reverb. All these effects are easy to do outside of the device. You don't really need them in the device. So yeah. Anyway, as far as like navigating, it has a lot of, I think, unnecessary stuff for simple sound design. And so yeah, I like this one. It's poly or monophonic. It has retrig and legato for the monophonic. So that's I almost always use retrig, but legato is nice to have. I don't know, but a big part is it has portamento or glide. So that's a sound design thing that I'll use, especially when I'm making like leads. I probably wouldn't ever have to glide up that much, but having the option to glide between notes is nice, and it's not available on the Sinister. The fact that it has a unison is pretty nice for getting like a detuned effect pretty easily. So like you can essentially have way more than 2 oscillators by having additional voices and detuning them. Pitch wheel amount. It's sort of funny. They have tune and detune, but it seems like this is like the coarse tune. This is the fine tune. So this is like going between. How many is this? This is 1, 2. Okay, so it has a full octave up and octave down for the tune. So if you, it's sort of weird. Like I never am tuning my oscillators differently, except if I'm like tuning one to be like a harmony. So like a major, minor third, or a fifth or a seventh, which is what this tune is for, is to tune this oscillator 2 separate from oscillator 1, whereas the tune and detune here are tuning both of these together. Don't know. Maybe I should try teaching synthesis with this instead. Like the layout really isn't that bad, and this is maybe more approachable because this is more similar to how other both hardware and software synths are going to sort of be laid out. They'll be laid out in a way that is not like completely different sections for each thing. And I feel like this is also seems more approachable, whereas the Sinister just has like having 3 oscillators and having 2 filters and having 3 LFOs and 3 envelopes. I think just can be a little bit intimidating. There's like a little bit too much stuff going on. Where this has like all the basics that you're gonna need to make lots of different synth sounds. Yeah, probably use this. I also just personally like it better for my own sound design. Okay, well, I'm gonna open up Reason for a bit. I'm gonna open up Reason. Maybe do a 30-minute challenge. It's been a little bit. That was the Friction rack extension I downloaded, I guess, a couple weeks ago. It was just the demo that I had. I guess it expired. Makes sense. I do like how Reason has so many devices that are really sweet. Like out of the box is just like really solid instruments. I mean, I know that other DAWs like Ableton and Logic have good, and FL Studio have good built-in devices. But from like a sound design and synthesis perspective, and enjoying hardware, Reason stuff is just really appealing. I do wonder now that Reason, that there's the option of you can open Reason as a VST in other DAWs. I wonder if Reason Studios is gonna start releasing their instruments as individual VSTs that people can buy. I mean, as soon as I start doing that somewhat, I think, spells the end for Reason as like a competing DAW. I mean, it's sort of already, they've sort of already admitted defeat in being like a DAW that like a top 3 DAW or whatever, by being like you can open it as a VST in any other DAW. Because essentially all the like main advantages that Reason had over other DAWs were its devices. I wonder if that is They did the name change recently from being Propellerhead Software to being Reason Studios. Yeah, I think I'm actually gonna open up Reaper. $30 minute challenge. Okay. One, two, three, four. This will be our image. Got our timer up. Bring this image up on screen. Lake Sunset. I'll just pop the link, the image link in chat. Bring up the image here, just a sec. Okay, that looks right. Let's see if my workflow in Reaper works for a 30-minute challenge. Get started in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. I think I'll start with a surge. What sort of sound do I want? Volume is a bit hot. We'll have this be a envelope, and we'll have it affect its amount. Bring down the decay a bit. Do some reverb on this. bring down the level a bit more. Just record something down. Let's get a click. Actually, okay. Tap. Transport tap tempo. I want to have new shortcut. I'm gonna have number pad delete. Nudge right. No. Okay, so this will be my tab. Okay, we'll do 108. That's fine. And do this long. Okay. Yeah, it's fine. Nothing fabulous. Oops. Quantize. Sure. Quantize this. Let's see how it works. Oops. Need to adjust that node over. This one fly over another one as well. Okay, there's a... Oops. That sounds good. Okay, and now let's get some drums in here. Check out the J Dilla ones. Yeah, I'll try this one. Let's get a snare or something. Sure. Like that as well. What else we got? Some closed hats. Sure. Any other sounds? check this loop out. Where did my... I think I lost the snare that I was looking for, but this is a... might use this as my snare. Sort of rim thing. So 16th notes. I really need to have that be like set that this is the default. Essentially what I do every time. So don't want it that often, and I probably want like every other one to be down in volume a bit. That. Why are these so small? Wait, what if I do? There we go. Bring this volume down a bit. Oops, brought the level down of everything because everything is selected. Got it. Bring off that. Maybe I want more halftime feel. So what if I like take out this? Oops. Oops. And just have like some fading and copy like oops. Copy this over. That maybe. It's interesting. Yeah, I think I like that better. let's see, what do we want to add? Nope, that wasn't recording. Wait, what? Why did I thought Control R? There we go. That last one. Might do some more like symphonic stuff. Oops. I want organ. Bring up the level on this a bit. Can't really hear it. Oops. Record that. Let's try that. sounds good. Wait, is this not on this track? Oh, it's on an item? I didn't know I could do that. Okay. I might have to look at that in the future. Let's get a base in here. I think I'll use Surge. Maybe actually, I'll do FM. I'm probably going to simplify this a little bit. Bring that amount down a little bit. Oops. Okay. Let's try this out. See what this looks like. Yeah, I think that sounds decent. Oops. around too much. Tuning now. Okay, let me, oops. So I have a region. I'm gonna sort of copy this out a couple times and then do some arranging. I might actually add in a so probably gonna get rid of most of the stuff. Maybe keep the clarinet. Let's see. If we touch this and then hit this. Mix, okay. So I want a marker there, a marker here. Bring this up. Probably delay as well. Maybe not. Maybe I just want the feedback. Okay. Boom. Okay, time's up. I guess this will be our beat. 30-minute challenge. Let's go ahead, listen back to this. Interesting. Felt pretty good for a 30-minute challenge. I definitely, there was it would have been nice to like finish a transition thing here. I wanted to get a reverb on this, the strings here. I just started working on it like while I was playing back there. I think I'd maybe want the bass to be like legato. I think I could also maybe, let's see, do like a tape effect on the strings. Yeah, that doesn't sound too bad. That was cool. We'll save that. Today is the 5th. So 2, 5, 20. 3-minute challenge. And this was Lake Sunset or Sunset Lake, I can't remember. Okay. I'm going to try and do a synthesizer sound design lesson again, this time with the Charlatan. Okay. Let's see. Gonna drink some water. See if we can give an explanation of synthesis. So I'm gonna have my Charlatan, but then I'm also going to have a oscilloscope, and then also an EQ, which I can do here like this. So oscilloscope, EQ. Okay. Let's see. Okay. looking at these. Okay. Let's see how clear and concise I can be. Just a sec. Okay. So, I'm going to do my best to explain synthesis, the basics of synthesis in a clear and concise way, while also visualizing as much as I can. So, right now I'm here in Reaper, and I'm going to be using the Charlatan, which is a free VST. You can download. I will give a link to it in the description. And then I have an oscilloscope VST that comes with Reaper, as well as an EQ that visualizes frequencies. And that also comes in Reaper, which can be downloaded for free. I'll also have a link in the description for that. So everything you see and everything I'm going to explain here you can download and mess with on your own. So yeah, let's get started. Basically, synthesizers are made up of a bunch of different components, and those different components together are how you can sort of shape sound and create the sounds that you want. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is oscillators, and most synthesizers that you're going to come across are going to have oscillators and an oscillator section, and this is where you choose waveforms. And we have the basic waveforms that we're going to be coming across are triangle waves, which look like this. We have sawtooth waves, which are going to look like this. And we have square waves, which are going to look like this. And those are the three most common waveforms that you're going to come across. But you might also come across like noise oscillators, which will look something like this, which is just sort of a bunch of different frequencies all at once. It's sort of atonal. It won't be like a specific frequency or specific shape. It will be sort of randomized chaos and sound like white noise. And you might also come across sine wave waveforms in the oscillator section. The Charlatan does not have sine wave in the oscillator section, so we're not going to be talking about it here. But yeah, essentially the closer you are to a sine wave, the less high frequency harmonics you're going to have. So a triangle wave is, of the basic waveforms, is the most similar to a sine wave without being a sine wave. So if I play let me turn this volume back up, you'll see that the frequencies that are the most prominent are going to be the ones around the note that I'm playing. and then beyond that, you can hear some higher frequencies, but they're going to be much lower and gradually getting lower. These dips up are what are called harmonics, and so different waveforms will have more harmonics showing up, like at louder levels. But a triangle wave is fairly simple and relatively close to a sine wave, and so it's going to be mainly focused on whatever note you're playing, the frequencies of whatever note you're playing. Whereas if I switch to a sawtooth wave, you're going to see that the higher harmonics are going to be much higher in level, and so it will sound a lot brighter, and yeah, a lot more higher frequencies can be a little bit harsher. And it's similar for a square wave. So again, here's a triangle wave. If I went to square wave, a square wave also has more harmonics up higher, but you'll notice that the square wave, their harmonics are like the difference between the main harmonics and the less forward harmonics is pretty extreme, as opposed to the sawtooth wave, where the main harmonics and the sort of other harmonics are all up. That's not the best way to explain it, but essentially there are more harmonics with the sawtooth wave that are prominent than with the square wave. So the sawtooth wave is sort of the most harsh sounding, but the square wave can also be fairly harsh. Something I didn't explain right here is the shape, and this is what the charlatan uses to modify the oscillators. It's not uncommon to have a knob similar to this for a square wave, and this is like can be often be called like pulse width, and it can allow you to adjust the harmonics. With the triangle wave, they use this shape to turn this triangle wave into a sawtooth wave. So yeah, that's the very basics of oscillators, specifically in charlatan, but those concepts are applicable to most synthesizers that you're going to come across. There are different oscillator types, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. Those just give you more options for what the waveform actually looks like. But the most basic ones that you're going to come across are, again, triangle, square, and then sawtooth like this. Moving along, we have two oscillators here, and so you can have your synthesizer having multiple oscillators at a time. Reasons you might want to do that is you could have like doubled up octaves, so I'm playing one note, and I could have this second oscillator be one octave down, bring up the level on it. So now it's now I have a sawtooth wave that is an octave up and a sawtooth wave that is an octave down, and I can just sort of fill out the sound a bit. I could also tune it to give it a like major, like a harmony. So if I wanted it to be like a major third or minor third, or I could tune it to like a fifth or like a seventh. I believe that's a seventh. And Anyways, I'm getting distracted. This is getting off subject. Keep it simple. So we have an oscillator moving along. This pitch section allows me to mess with the oscillators, so I can like tune them differently. Or I can have things mess with the tuning. I'll get into more of this in a minute. Moving on to filters. Filters are a way that you can cut out certain frequencies from your oscillators. So if right now it's a low pass filter, and the Charlatan has two different low pass filters, and it has a band pass filter. The difference between the 4 and the 2 are essentially the steepness of the curve where it cuts off. So the cutoff is the frequency that's cutting off. So you play this note. As I bring this down, you'll see the high frequencies gradually being cut out. So let me, until they're all cut out. And changing this from the 4 to the 2 will change the steepness of this curve. So that's 4, and then if I change it to 2, it's a less steep curve down. And this can affect the shape of the waveform. And so you can get a sort of close to a sine wave by filtering out higher frequencies. Anyways, that is very basics of what a filter does. Low pass filter, the name comes from letting low frequencies pass through unaffected. This one does not have a high pass filter, but a high pass filter does the opposite, lets the high frequencies pass over and cuts the low frequencies. This also has a band pass filter, which allows you to cut a very specific, band pass means a very specific band, a very specific area of this. So like that comes through. So let me bring this back. So if I move this around, it's centered like around here and not affecting like a section like this. So like if I disabled this, I could get a similar effect by going like this. The difference being that the filter is getting rid of stuff, whereas what I'm doing here is I'm boosting certain frequencies. So it's sort of the inverse. Rather than boosting specific frequencies, it's just not cutting these specific frequencies. Bandpass filters are used a lot less than low-pass filters. Low-pass filters by far the most used filter type in synthesis and sound design. Yeah, that's filter. The rest of these settings are getting into modifiers, and I will talk about that soon. Q also can sometimes be known as resonance, is how much the frequency that the cutoff is at is being resonated. So sort of it's basically boosting the frequency of wherever the cutoff is. So if I bring this down, it's boosting a specific frequency the more that this is turned up. So you can start making your filter have a tonal sound by bringing up the Q, or resonance, as it's often called in other devices. Moving along, we're going to get to modifiers. So modifiers are things that you use to modify other things in the simplest terms. So envelopes are very common, and by default, most synthesizers will have an amp envelope affecting the oscillators. So right now, this envelope is essentially affecting the volume of whatever's coming out of these oscillators. So the way that an envelope works is it will turn up the volume of an oscillator from being nothing to being full volume when you hit a key. And the speed at which it does that is the attack. So if the attack is all the way down, it will immediately get to full volume. Whereas if the attack is slower, it will gradually get to full volume. And if the higher it is, the longer it will take to get to full volume. And then after the attack happens, then the next parameter, decay, is an amount of time that it will take to get to whatever the sustain is at. So sustain is a level. So right now the sustain is all the way up, meaning that it's full volume. So what this is saying is after 0 seconds or after no time, it will be at full volume, and then after however much time this is, it will still be at full volume. So right now the decay is irrelevant because the sustain is all the way up. But if I brought the sustain down, then this would be saying that instantaneously, because the attack is all the way down, it will get to full volume, and then over some period of time it will get to this level. We'll just say this is half, but depending on the envelope and the synthesizer, this might not be relative, like full volume, half volume. It depends on the specific envelope, but let's just say that this is half volume. So instantaneously we full volume, and then over some time it will get to half volume. So let me play a note. So full volume, and then it got to half volume. If I have the decay up higher, it will take longer to get to half volume. So full volume, and then it will gradually get to half volume. And if the decay is down very far, then it will mean that it will very quickly get to half volume. So instantaneously get to full volume, and then very quickly it will get to half volume after that. So that gives like a very sort of clicky or plucky sound. And if I brought the sustain all the way down, then essentially what this would be saying is instantly turns to full volume, and then over the course of the decay time, so this is like medium length amount of time, it will turn all the way down. So playing a note. Let me bring on my keyboard so you can see the notes that I'm hitting. You can see when I'm hitting a note. So that is what's happening currently. I'm going to go back to having the sustain be mid-level, and I'll have the decay up a little bit. So it will take a little bit of time to get to half volume. Now to get to this next parameter, we have release, which is the amount of time that it takes for whatever the level is at when you release your finger to get to 0. So when it's all the way down, it will essentially instantaneously drop to 0 volume when you let go with your finger. Whereas if you bring up the release, then it will take more time to get to 0 volume after you release your finger. If I have really high release, then that means it will take a long time to get to 0 volume after I release my finger. So my finger's off, but it's still ringing out, and that's because of the release. Generally, the release is based on whatever the level was at when you released your finger. So that means that it might not be going from medium level to off. It could be, if I released my finger before the decay finished, then it would be decaying from a high volume. So for example, if I had the decay up really high and the sustain way down, if I held a note down, I guess a better example is like medium. So if I hold a note down, then it will decay to a volume of 0 very quickly. And then even though I'm releasing my finger, it's decaying from 0 volume over a long time to 0 volume. So you don't really hear anything. Whereas if I hit it quickly before the decay can finish, then it will release. So decay, it will release, it will turn down in level over a long period of time from whatever the level was when I released my finger. So because I hit it and released super quickly, I released faster than the decay could get down to 0. So instead of it decaying quickly, it's decaying slowly, because the release is what determines the level once I release my finger, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's still coming down. Okay. That's the very basics of an envelope, and specifically the AMP envelope. These same concepts can be used for other envelopes and other parameters. So I reset this back to how it was initially, which is a slow, like a very quick attack, and sustain is all the way up and the release is all the way down. So essentially the note is only happening when I'm pressing the note, and as long as I'm pressing the note, it's going to be full volume. It's common to use a envelope to affect the filter, and so you can create similar plucky type of effects, but instead of it being a matter of just volume, it's high frequencies coming through or low frequencies coming through, and I don't know, you have more sound design options when you're doing a filter envelope rather than just an amp envelope. So here's what we have naturally. You'll see in this filter section, this is how you determine this envelope is already selected. So that means that this mod envelope is going to be affecting this. Currently, the amount that this mod envelope is affecting it is 0. But if I turn this up, then this will affect this filter cutoff knob more. Is essentially what it's doing. So if I have it all the way up, we're not going to hear anything. But if I bring this down, then it means that well, we know that the cutoff being down means that it's cutting off the high frequencies. But if the mod is up, then that means that this envelope will be turning up this in the same sort of way that this amp envelope turns up essentially the level of this. So we can have a quick decay and then have the sustain. We'll have the sustain all the way down. So it will turn up this knob by this much over a short period of time, and we'll have the release down as well. So this should give us a plucky effect that the note will still be sustained, but the amount that this knob is turned up will not be sustained. So it will turn this knob up very quickly and then come back down and stay at this level. So let's see what that looks like. So this is a plucky effect using a filter envelope rather than an amp envelope. So you have the low frequencies still coming through fine after the quick pluck of the higher frequencies. And we can adjust these settings more. So quicker decay makes it even pluckier. If we bring the cutoff down more, it will be cutting off almost all the frequencies, and so we won't even hear anything after it decays, or hear very little. We can turn up the mod amount so it turns this knob up higher, so we hear more high frequencies quickly. And then let's try messing around with an attack. So if we do a slow attack, it gives it this sort of reverse sound, or like a swell of like strings. So yeah, that is how you can use a envelope to affect the filter. Envelopes can affect more than just filters. You can have them affect lots of different things. You can have them affect like the pitch, for example. So if I was to use this mod envelope to affect the pitch, I can have it selected here and then turn this up. And then I have to choose an oscillator that I want it to affect. So I'll have it affect oscillator 1. I'm going to bring this filter back up so it sounds normal. And then if we bring up this mod amount, then it's essentially going to be doing the same thing that this does. It will allow this envelope to affect this knob more. So if I bring this up, so as a slow attack, it's bringing the pitch up and then down. If I had the attack all the way down, it would immediately be the higher pitch and then come down over the time of the decay. So you can get sort of lots of like kick sounds and stuff often have a pitch at the beginning. Usually a very fast pitch effect. And we'll have a more sort of round basic oscillator. So this is getting more into like what an 808 kick would sound like. I might have like a decay and or a release. I could bring up the mod a little bit more maybe to make it a little bit more of a hit at the beginning. Anyways, that's one way that you could use a envelope on pitch as an effect. Bringing that mod back down so it's not affecting pitch anymore. We should be back to our sawtooth wave. I'm going to move to something I didn't explain yet is monophonic versus polyphonic. So a monophonic synth is a synth where you can only play one note at a time. So this is a synth that you can change between monophonic and polyphonic. So two common monophonic settings are retrigger or legato. And this is basically changing whether the envelopes retrigger each time you hit a new note or not. So on a monophonic synth, you can only play one note at a time. So when I play this note and then I play this note, it will add instead of adding this note, it turns off the old one and plays the new one. Whereas if I had it on poly, if I played this note and hit this one, it just adds that note on top of it. So retrig means that it will re-trigger the envelopes when I hit the new note, and each new note that I hit. So if I had like a very plucky effect on here, it will re-trigger the envelope each time I hit a new note, so you'll get a new pluck. Whereas if I hit legato, it would not re-trigger the envelope when I hit a new note. So if I had like a slightly slower pluck, it will still change the note, but it won't. It will. The decay will continue to happen. It won't re-trigger because I hit the new note. Whereas if I had it on this, it re-triggers. That's the very basics of this. Glide is a common feature of synths. Glide is something that usually is something you use for monophonic synths, and it is the amount of time it takes to go from one pitch to a new pitch. Another name for this is portamento, but yeah, glide and portamento are both used a lot. So when it's all the way down, it will instantly go from one pitch to another, whereas if you bring this up, it will slow the amount of time that it takes to get from one note to another, so it will bend into those notes. So I'm going to bring up the sustain on this envelope again. So that's a very long glide, so it takes a long time to get from one pitch to another. As I bring this down, as opposed to having no glide. That is what glide does. LFO. We were just talking about envelopes as modifiers. LFO is another type of modifier that is very common in synths. LFO stands for low frequency oscillator, and that is essentially, this is another oscillator like these, but instead of it being used to make sound that you hear, you instead use it to adjust things. So this is a triangle wave. I also have a sine wave, a square wave, sawtooth wave, and then like these can be several different things. This could be like random. I think this is probably a random sort of step oscillator, but the most common ones are these ones, with sine being the most common LFO shape. Essentially, this is going to adjust a setting smoothly up and down and up and down over at a speed of whatever the rate knob is at. So, for example, if I had this LFO affect the pitch, so I'm going to have the pitch be affected by LFO. I'm going to have the amount that affects it turn up gradually. So I'm holding a note, and interesting, even though I have this mod all the way down, it's affecting it a bit. But as I bring this up, it will affect the pitch more and more. And the speed that it's affecting it is the rate. So if I bring it down, it'll be adjusting the pitch up and down very slowly, smoothly though. and then bringing the rate up. As opposed to using a waveform like a square wave, it will adjust the pitch, but very abruptly. So it will be high pitch, low pitch, high pitch, low pitch, and then still using a rate though. And like the pitch that it's bending to is going to be determined by the mod amount. So that is an LFO. It's also very common to use an LFO on a filter, and this sort of ties into sort of origins of dubstep, is using LFO's modifier to affect the filter cutoff frequency. And so like if I guess I'll use a sawtooth wave for this example, but I will have this LFO affect this knob, so I'll bring this down a bit and I'll bring up the amount that affects it. And if I play a low note, and then I could adjust the rate. I might add some resonance. I'm using a low pass filter, but I could also use like a band pass filter. And the other setting that is common on LFOs is the sync option. So you can have it not synced, so then it's the rate is just a frequency that you adjust with this, whereas changing it to a breakdown of whatever your tempo is in your project, you can do that as well. Which it looks like in Charlatan, this makes it so that you don't have the option to change the rate. You have to just choose it from here. But you might want to choose this if you want it to like sync up with the tempo of or whatever beat you're doing. Yeah, that is that. And I think that is the basics of synthesizers and synthesis. There's a lot more to it, obviously, when you get into more advanced stuff, but those are the sort of basic elements. And Charlatan, which I do really like this synthesizer being very simple, and all the elements that you commonly want to mess with are all right here and easy to mess with. This also has a unison, which is pretty sweet. I'm gonna turn off this filter stuff. So back to just my like sine wave, or not sine wave, a sawtooth wave. And unison is pretty cool. It essentially adds multiples of whatever oscillator or oscillators you have going, and allows you to sort of detune them. So one voice doesn't do anything. That's just, you have your one voice already. If you add two voices, then it adds a second copy of whatever sort of oscillator stuff you have going on, and then you can detune them from each other to add some complexity and add some effect to add sort of width to a synth sound. And as you bring up the detune, it becomes less and less distinguished, becomes harder to distinguish what the tone is that you're playing. Pretty dissonant. But some slight detune is always very nice for thickening up the synth sound, and adding more voices thickens it up even further. So let me go to Poly. You get a nice, thick sort of super saw sound. It's very high in level. As opposed to if I had only one voice. Still sounds nice, but it doesn't sound nearly as thick and filled out. And as I bring the detune up, anyways, that is very basics. I think I'm going to stop this video here, but hopefully there's some interesting or useful information there for you. And let me know if you have any questions or anything was confusing, and thanks for watching. Anyways, I think that will be it for me, and I will see you guys later.